party are slamming the top Senate Democrat, California Congressman Ro Khanna, calling for Schumer to be replaced, saying, quote, "If you can't lead the fight to stop healthcare premiums from skyrocketing for Americans, what will you fight for?" 8 Democrats joined almost all Republicans to advance the bill, touting a guarantee of a December vote on extending the tax credits. On Capitol Hill, Ryan Schmelz, Fox News.
Secretary of Veterans Affairs Doug Collins says it is crucial to get funding going for veterans programs.
And I think the biggest thing right now is let us open the whole VA. Right now we've had our hospitals, our clinics, and all have been working just as normal. That is the one good thing about advanced appropriations, that we can make sure that all the medical needs that our veterans have are there. But we suffered a big blow and still are suffering a big blow when it comes to educational benefits, outreach, vocational rehab, a slowdown in our disability claims and benefits just a little bit, because we're just having to deal with so much, folks being off. I have over 30,000 plus that are furloughed, and almost, half of those are still working but not getting paid.
The leader of Syria is in Washington to meet with President Trump. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo reacts.
This leader was someone who was working for Al-Qaeda. He was the leader of an organization called HTS, a terror organization, who was designated a terrorist by the United States of America. So pretty unlikely, but lots has transpired in Syria. Assad is gone. That is a good thing for the world and for the region, for Israel. Now the task is for him to rebuild his own country, which is deeply fragmented and had over 6 or 7 million people flee the country because of Assad's regime.
Happy 250th birthday to the United States Marine Corps. Chris Foster has more on the milestone.
The Corps was formed by the Continental Congress on November 10, 1775, primarily to protect ships and carry out amphibious landings and raids during the Revolutionary War. The Continental Marine Corps was disbanded in 1783 and reestablished by an act of Congress in 1798 as the United States Marine Corps. It's part of the Department of the Navy, a separate branch with its own chain of command. There have been 250th birthday events around the country all year. The U.S. Mint now has 100,000 commemorative silver coins for sale.
The Chicago Board of Education says students studying to be teachers at a local Christian college cannot participate in its student teaching program unless the college denies its faith.
Every year, Moody Bible Institute has about 30 students in its elementary education program. Part of the requirement of the degree is that the students spend a certain amount of time in a real classroom doing observation, practicum, and student teaching. Chicago Public Schools are saying they're not going to let Moody students into their classrooms until Moody relents from its biblical standards in its hiring practices. Moody has asked Alliance Defending Freedom to help the school district understand the finer points of the First Amendment. Attorney Jeremiah Gallus.
Religious institutions have the right to be religious, and if it were to hire those who disagree and reject what it believes and teaches, it would cease to be a religious school. They're conditioning participation on the school giving up its rights to hire those who share its faith.
ADF has filed a federal lawsuit to end the discrimination and grant Moody equal access to Chicago Public Schools' student teaching program. Dr. Ray Pritchard of Keep Believing Ministries lived in Chicago for years and even sent his son to Moody.
What the city of Chicago is saying is we don't want Moody to be Moody, or we want Moody Institute, but we don't want Moody Bible Institute, which is outrageous.
He says for 139 years, Moody Bible Institute has been shining the light of the gospel in the very heart of the city of Chicago.
I would think that a city like Chicago, with so many problems inside its public school system, would want more, not less, of the young people that are produced by a great school like Moody Bible Institute.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
More news online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Hey, have you considered becoming a Great Commission partner? If you do, you'll be joining others who believe like you and are determined to defend against those who want to destroy God's institution of the family. You'll also receive some great benefits, like full access to AFA Stream, a monthly subscription to our magazine, access to exclusive donor events, and more as our thanks for your support. Please stop by afr.net/donate today for all the details. afr.net/donate.
We inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
we also rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us. I'm Walker Wildmon with you on today's program. The show is hosted each week by myself and Rick Green. I'm with you Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Rick's with you on Tuesdays and Thursdays during most weeks. Let's turn our attention to the scripture, and then we'll jump into some of the news that we're going to cover this hour. John chapter 2 is where we are this week. John chapter 2, looking at verse 19 and 8, and in order to understand 19, you have to read 18 through 21. So this is Jesus after he performed the miracle at Cana, turning the water into the wine. Then he goes to the temple, and of course you've got the money changers, and they're buying and selling inside the temple, which is an abomination. So Jesus is clearly upset about that. He runs them out of the temple. And so he gets in this exchange with the Jewish leaders. And they're basically asking, under what authority are you doing this? So verse 18, so the Jews answered and said to him, what sign do you show us since you do these things? So basically, hey, show yourself. If you're this anointed one, then show us. What signs are you going to show to us that you're this anointed one? And mind you, this is right on the heels of the miracle at Cana. And so it's as if, how many miracles do you need to believe? 1 or 7? But nonetheless, Jesus answered and said to them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. And of course, the Jews don't understand. So they said, quote, it has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you will raise it up in 3 days? Of course, looking at verse 21, but he was speaking of the temple of his body. Therefore, when he had risen from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this to them, and they believed the scripture and the word which Jesus had said. And so here we go. Jesus prophesying, Jesus predicting, foretelling of his temple, his body that was crucified and resurrected in 3 days. And in hindsight, the disciples fully understood this. And that's John chapter 2, verse 19. All right. Moving into the stories I want to talk about this segment, we do have a couple guests coming up, so you're going to stick around for that, talking about EBT, SNAP benefits, welfare fraud. That's been a topic of conversation in the news in light of the government shutdown and the Democrats wanting to continue the subsidies and the expansion of the welfare state, the welfare programs. And then we'll talk about what different attorneys general are doing around the country to fight back against government overreach. But this segment, this episode, or rather this segment, I want to talk about the economy. I talked a little bit about this last week. And President Trump is making some headway, so I don't want to go without saying that. Gas prices are down significantly under President Trump on where we are now. You're down to $2.30, $2.40 a gallon. You're under $3 now for the national average, I believe, is the latest number. That's factoring in fuel costs from California and New York. So to get that national average down under $3 is significant. So energy prices, President Trump is doing well. I will caveat that and say we need to be on the lookout for what AI is going to do to energy cost. We need to be on the lookout for that in the next 12 months. That could be problematic on the energy front. But nonetheless, President Trump's doing what he can as president to unleash energy and drive down costs. Inflation's come down slightly since he's been sworn in. But there's so much headway to make, and that's the point I want to make now, is there's so much headway that has to be made in order to truly get this economy moving again for everyone, The 50-year mortgage was floated over the weekend by President Trump. He put out an X post saying, 50-year mortgage coming your way. And supposedly they're looking into that. And I want to play a clip of, this is on Fox Business on Stuart Varney's show, of this gentleman's name's Brian Wesbury. And he's a First Trust Advisors. He's a chief economist there. Once again, Brian Wesbury is his name. And he had some wise words because he was questioning, hey, what do you think about this 50-year mortgage? And in essence, it's not a good idea, and there's multiple reasons why. But not only is it not a good idea for the various reasons that stand on their own, but it's really avoiding the major issue, and that is government growth and government spending. Let's listen to this clip.
Come on in, Brian Westbury. You are an economist, and you're going to economize for us. Could this be... some people in the Trump administration describe this as a game changer, a 50-year mortgage. Yeah. That sounds a bit strong to me. Is it a game changer?
Yeah, it is a bit strong, Stuart, but yeah, I mean, there is nothing wrong with it, and it will help some people pay a little bit less every month, even though you do pay more interest over time. We've done the same thing with automobiles. It used to be a 3-year loan, then it went 4, 5, 6. I think there's some 8-year loans out there right now, and it's just all about taking down that monthly payment. But let me back up for just a second. If you take federal, state, and local government spending, plus everything we all spend to comply with regulations that the government creates and puts on us, that equals over 50% of our GDP in this country. So government's taking half of our income. No wonder houses aren't affordable. And then what we try to do is fix that with these other things. And what we really should be doing is shrinking the burden of government and taxation on homeowners.
Well said. Now, President...
So I couldn't agree more. And here's the thing, and this is not all on President Trump, mind you. It's very important to understand that the way our government is structured, congressional acts are needed. I mean, Congress has to get involved here, all right? The president can't, wave a magic wand and expect everything to be fixed. And I think what President Trump is doing is he's looking at what's within his control, what's within his authority, and he's trying to do everything he can within his authority to fix our economic failures or economic woes. But what you have here is not a 30-year or 50-year mortgage problem. You have a government problem. And unless we fix that, all these other things are not true fixes, right? I mean, who wants to sign up for a 50-year mortgage? Give me a break. 30's too long, in my opinion. 50? So let's just say best case scenario, you get a mortgage in your 20s, you're going to have a mortgage till you're 80 or mid-70s. No, I don't want to have a mortgage when I'm 70. And so, and not to mention the compound interest you pay on 50 versus 30 is astronomical. It's insane, the amount of interest you pay over those 50 years. You're better off renting, in my opinion. By the time you factor in the interest paid over the additional 20 years on top of the 30, you can rent. And I'm not suggesting renting is the best way to go. I'm just telling you from a cost perspective, 50 years a no-go. It's an absolute no-go. Now, but what the economist there just explained is he explained about how 50% of our income is getting sucked into all these things, whether it's regulations or direct taxation. Roughly half of our income is getting pulled back into the government through regulation, through taxes, and through other means, and through inflation. You got to factor that in as well. And so we have a government problem. The government is too big and they spend too much money. That's the problem. And so I think while we have this once-in-a-generation opportunity with President Trump at the helm, and Republicans are in both chambers, they've got to be more aggressive here. I mean, we have to be more aggressive. If not, we're going to blink, we're going to turn around, Republicans are going to be in the minority again, President Trump's not going to be in the White House, and we're going to look back, and all we got is a one big beautiful bill. All we got was a one big beautiful bill. By the way, they need to be talking about doing another one of those reconciliation bills coming up. I mean, the time to be aggressive, the time to be revolutionary is now. And I think that's why President Trump was so, verbal and vocal about getting rid of the filibuster, because that is the only way to pass legislation when you have such slim majorities. But the problems are so big. Bobby, you and I were talking about this morning. The problems are so big economically. President Trump is making headway. The mortgage rates are down. They're under 6% now. They're either at or under 6%, depending on which lender you look at, right, which is significant. We've seen a 150 basis point drop over the last 12 to 18 months. Home prices are coming down slowly, but I think we've clearly still got some room to go before you can kind of call it a victory, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. I think market forces are doing a pretty decent job in getting us there.
Yeah.
I mean, to your point, and you've mentioned this several times, especially on Friday editions, it's just not sustainable.
Right.
And this is why we're losing, young people.
Yes.
From a capitalism standpoint to socialism surely is better because I can't afford this way of life.
Yes.
And so to that end, there has to be measures that are taken somehow, some way,
yeah,
to get it to where a financial life is just that.
Yeah.
Something affordable for the young folks coming up.
Yes, and President, you and I were talking about the timeline here. I mean, President Trump, he's been given basically 24 months to fix what Biden messed up.
Right.
Before the midterms, I'm talking.
And that's just for the correction to get to zero.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's just a break even. But you were talking about how voters they feel like they need a trophy, right? They need something to show for these 2 years.
For
and
sure.
We're heading into year 2 come January. If voters don't feel like they're making enough headway, they're either going to stay at the House, or they're going to vote for the Democrats.
And unfortunately, that's been kind of the outlook in these special elections, or out of cycle elections, I should say, that took place here just last Tuesday.
Yep.
A great number of folks who turned out for Trump. You don't have near that turnout.
Yeah.
That could have easily won for the conservatives and the Republicans.
Yeah.
But without those numbers, and to your point, if people are just sitting home on their hands, well, there's nothing we can really foresee and anything we can change here. I don't know. It's a pretty dismal place to be and to be thinking about.
Yeah.
But let's face it.
Yeah.
You talk about it all the time. Rick Green obviously talks about it all the time. Our job, biblically and as good citizens, is to do what's expected of us to do.
That's right.
That's to support our party.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. The thing is, you've got to get inflation has to be back at 2%, and I know that seems so out of reach, and maybe it is, but you can't have 3% inflation, and that's average, by the way. That's aggregate. You look across the board, some of these categories are still running double digits, 15, 20, 30% inflation. And you can't run that for this many years and expect, you get gas below $3 a gallon and then boom, everything's fixed. I mean, this inflation has just eaten away at wages and wage growth to where it's just going to take a lot of time to make up this lost ground. I mean, we're working against time here. And I understand that. And so I'm going to, give the president and the Republicans more time, even in the midterms, but not every voter sees it the way I do. Not every voter sees it more long-term as I do. They're looking for short-term results. And that's just the way the voters' mindset is. And so Republicans are going to have to show for it come the midterms.
Leave your offering there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and present your offering. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Jesus focused authentic Christ following to heart evaluation in addition to conduct assessment in the Sermon on the Mount. He also highlighted the reality that worshiping God includes our relationships with brothers and sisters in Christ. He described a worshiper en route to make an offering unto the Lord, who remembered that he had a frayed relationship with the brother. Christ commanded him to render a whole offering by first being reconciled to the brother, then continue in worship by making an offering. Love for God is displayed in our relationships in his body.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner, or visit the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
If you are 65 or older, you know this, inflation is hitting everyone hard right now, especially when it comes to healthcare. Over the last 10 years, healthcare costs have skyrocketed by, get this, 230%. If you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are still out-of-pocket expenses like deductibles and co-payments, and they really add up. But here's some good news. MediShare 65 Plus is designed to fill in those gaps and help protect you from rising healthcare costs. At only $99 per month up to age 75, you get peace of mind at a price you can afford. And MediShare is trusted, too. It's been around 30 years. It's not some big impersonal thing. It's a community of people helping each other, business owners, pastors, retirees. People love it. MediShare 65 Plus just makes sense. To learn more, give them a call. They're great to talk to. They'll offer to pray with you each time you call, too. Call now, 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE, 833-45-BIBLE.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildmon, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Hey, 2026 is your year to go with us on one of our Christian Heritage Tours. We've got some dynamite tours lined up for 2026. We're going to Colonial Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. We're also going to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, and we'll see George Washington's Mount Vernon estate while we're there, too. And then we're going to Boston and to Concord and to Lexington, all the history in Boston. We'll also be meeting with a couple of our founding fathers. The D.C. and Williamsburg tours are in June and September, and the Boston tour is in September. So if you want to go with us, you want to see the pricing, the itinerary, everything, go to wildmongroup.com, WILDMON group.com, wildmongroup.com, and we hope to see you on one of our 2026 tours.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to The Core here on American Family Radio. Well, each week we try to bring on guests from around the country and from different organizations and backgrounds to talk about what's going on in our country and things that can be done to solve these issues. On with us now is Leslie Ford. Leslie is Senior Fellow at the Alliance for Opportunity and has written and spoken extensively on our various welfare programs, including SNAP, EBT, Medicaid, etc. And Leslie's with us now to talk just that. Hey, Leslie, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Well, the timeliness of this interview fits well because a portion of what was being discussed in the shutdown was whether or not some of these welfare benefits or welfare programs would lapse in funding due to Congress failing to pass a continuing resolution or a budget. Give us a little kind of background or an overview of the scale of some of these welfare programs, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the One Big Beautiful Bill and how that applies to states.
Yeah, so when we're talking about welfare in this country, there are about 1 in 3 Americans receive some sort of welfare assistance from the government. Quite a lot. The 2 biggest ones, that's food stamps or SNAP, supplemental assistance, nutrition assistance, and Medicaid. So when you're talking about SNAP, that's about $100 billion a year, and Medicaid is about, when you're looking at state and federal, about $894 billion a year. So we're talking about quite a lot of money, nearly $1 trillion a year in just these 2 programs. If you're looking at all the welfare programs that exist, you're probably up somewhere near about $1.5 trillion a year. That is a huge part of our federal budget. So, and I really like to emphasize here that these programs have ballooned substantially In just the past 5 years, I mean, since 2019, at the end of Trump 1, Snap was about $60 billion. Now it's $100 billion. That's a massive expansion in that time. And you're going to see kind of the same thing on the Medicaid side. It's ballooned 50% in the past 5 years alone. So we're seeing a lot more citizens dependent on these programs, and we've seen a massive amount of ballooning. And I think what you ended with is a question of, is everyone on these programs? Are they supposed to be on these programs? Because Americans are generous people. If we see someone in need, someone who needs healthcare, someone who needs food, we're going to rush into that situation and say, yes, let me help you. But when we really look at the error rates, when we look at the fraud rates in these programs, it's about $1 in $9 in SNAP isn't going to someone who is eligible for it. That's $13 billion a year. That is a lot of money. You're talking about billionaires all over the place. We are wasting billions of dollars. And OBBBA was passed in order to really stem the fraud that exists and making sure that we bring people off the sidelines of our societies into the heart of our communities. Because if you're on government assistance, you're not thriving. You're really not at the heart of our communities.
Yeah, you're right. Let me ask you one question before we do jump into some of the provisions that are aimed at kind of preventing fraud in the One Big Beautiful Bill. You mentioned the growth of the programs, which is not growth in a negative way. Usually growth is a good thing, but the expansion, if you will, or the growth in the number of people on these programs, whether it be SNAP, EBT, et cetera. Do you think that's, and the data may bear this out, I'm just not sure. Do you think that's because more people are falling into this poverty threshold needed to get the assistance, or are more people realizing they qualify? I mean, that just seems like a pretty drastic climb in number of people using these programs. You know, you just wonder why it ebbs and flows so drastically.
Yeah, and if it was a situation like the middle of 2020 when every city was shut down, you're like, okay, that makes sense. Like government spending ticks up then. But that's not really what we're seeing here. Even after the 2020 shutdowns came to a close, we saw an uptick in these programs and a sustained uptick. So a couple things are happening. And I'd really like to highlight two things. One, the benefits got a lot more generous. So SNAP benefits unilaterally under President Biden's administration went up 23%. Even his own government, Office of Accountability, looked at this and said, you didn't have the authority to do that, but there was no way to roll it back. So 23% off the bat, just higher benefits. But also coming out of the Biden administration was this instruction from the federal administration, from the people in charge up here, don't check income. Don't check whether the people who are, if they earn $1,000 a month on their receipt or they earn zero, you don't need to double check that. Just let them on through. And so when we're talking about fraud rates, those skyrocketed as well. So not only are benefits getting more generous, but people who don't really qualify for the programs are suddenly on the programs.
Wow. All right, let's talk provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill aimed at really preventing the level of fraud and misuse that you mentioned there. Break these down for us and talk about whether they have teeth to them or not, because a lot of the stuff that comes out of Washington isn't enforceable. But tell us about the One Big Beautiful Bill and these provisions.
So I'm going to start with food stamps. I'm going to focus a lot of my energy there because this one has teeth, y'all. Okay, so food stamps, how it's structured, the federal-state relationship is, okay, for every food stamp dollar that goes out the door that's loaded onto an EBT card that's spent at the store, state has no skin in the game. Every dollar is 100% on the federal taxpayers. But if a state has to spend money on administrative costs, so the caseworkers, checking eligibility, checking income, the state has to spend 50 cents of that dollar. Now, you might see where this ends up, where they're like, I'm going to cut back on my administrative costs. I'm going to cut back on checking. I'm just going to send dollars out the door because that doesn't impact my budget, my state general funds. And that's exactly what we saw happen. Between 2013 and 2024, the food stamp error rate, dollars that aren't reaching the people they should, it tripled from 3% to about 10, almost 11% today. And so what did the One Big Beautiful Bill do? It flipped that relationship. It said, okay, states, now you're on the hook for some of your benefits. If you have an error rate, if you're sending more than 6% out the door, that's incorrect, you're going to start paying a match. Now, let's take a state like Mississippi, for example. They have over a 10% error rate. And so it ratchets up. If you have over 6%, you have a 5%, you're covering 5 cents of the dollar. If you have over 8%, you're going to cover 10 cents of the dollar. And if you're over 10%, you're covering 15 cents of every dollar you send out the door. So Mississippi has over a 10% error rate, 10.69% or something like that. They're on the hook for 15% of benefits. That's $115 million every year to Mississippi state budget.
Wow. Let me ask you this.
Yeah, so that's real teeth.
Yeah, that is for sure. When states start realizing they've got to basically pay a match or a penalty for improperly sending these payments, that's a big deal. And they're going to fix the problem because you can't eat $100 million or come up with it. So do the feds have access to these error rates? I mean, this is or does the states have to report it? What's the accountability there with the error rate?
Exactly. So the process is something called quality control. And actually, the states do the first round of it. They take, across the 50 states, they take about 50,000, they review 50,000 cases, 50,000 people on SNAP. And they do the first pass and they do an intensive search and say, did we get this right? Did we get their income right? Did we check that we got their housing deduction right? All those questions. And then the feds come over the top and take a random portion of that 50,000 cases and review what the states did to make sure they got it right. So the states have all the information to know if they're getting this right or not. And more importantly, where they're getting it wrong if they're getting it wrong. And again, the states are going to check it. So they can't fudge there. They have tried to fudge in the past and they've gotten caught.
What about the work requirement? We heard a lot of talk during the One Big Beautiful Bill about the work requirement for Medicaid, correct? Is that right?
There are now, yes. Yeah, there are two. So there always has been a soft work requirement in the SNAP space for food stamps, but there's been a lot of waivers from it. So it was a work requirement for able-bodied adults without dependents. So think someone age 30 who doesn't have any kids in the home. In the SNAP space, that has been expanded. Now they say if you have a kid in the home who's 15 years old, you can still work 20 hours a week, and that's what we're going to require from you. You got to work, train, participate in education. That's what we're requiring from you. And they reformed all those waivers. So where, honestly, 3/4 of states had some form of a waiver. That's not in place anymore. Unless you have a very high unemployment rate, that doesn't exist. And now here's what OBBBA did on the Medicaid side. It said, okay, if you're on Medicaid and you're in that same population I just described on the SNAP side, you have the same work requirement. So if you are now age 19 to 64, that retirement age, and if you have a kid who's age 15 and above, 14 and above, you are expected to work just 20 hours a week. This is not the end of the world. And it's measured by minimum wage, just like you can go down to your Walmart. And if you can't find a job, if you absolutely can't, you can participate in education. You can go to a workforce training program. The point is, in a very realistic way, not only is this a reciprocal relationship in welfare where, yes, we're going to help you get stable, but the point is to get people back into the heart of our communities. Like I mentioned before, if you are on welfare and you're not working, which the vast majority of people aren't even doing this bare minimum requirement, even if they're able-bodied, you're on the sidelines of our society. You are not participating. You're not contributing. And when we see people who do this for months or years on end, their mental health declines, their physical health declines, their children's education levels decline. There is no pathway out of poverty without work. So work isn't supposed to be a punishment here. This isn't supposed to be like, hey, let's just push everyone off welfare. The point is to bring people back to self-sufficiency, to bring them to flourishing, honestly. So
yeah, to your
these
point,
are a really good reform.
Yeah, to your point, these were never intended, at least originally, I hope not, to be a permanent thing, right? I mean, just like unemployment, it's all supposed to be for a season, right? Somebody loses their job, they're going through a tough time, and they don't want to lose their house, so they go on unemployment for 2 months until they find a job or whatever. But in some instances, Leslie, once again, we're talking to Leslie Ford with the Alliance for Opportunity. In many instances, and I know this firsthand, just talking to people, the welfare becomes a lifestyle. I mean, they know what the income threshold is that they can't go above to not qualify for as much in government programs, and so they kind of teeter right below the threshold to qualify, and then they know how much money per child they can get if they have more kids. I'm not sure if there's anything the government can do about that, other than the fact that shouldn't some of these provisions have a sunset, right? I mean, you're not supposed to be on. You shouldn't be on EBT for 20 years. I mean, that just seems counterproductive. So do any of these programs have sunset provisions?
Not in SNAP or Medicaid, but I love that you brought up sunset provisions or time limits, because we ran this experiment before during welfare reform back in the 90s. And even then it was even worse. It was just cash flowing out the door, and 1 in 7 US children were on. It was called AFDC at the time, Aided Dependent Families with Children. And it created this intergenerational poverty where poverty became a way of life. And people stayed on the rolls for an average of 8 years. This is a serious way of life. But welfare reform in the 90s did two things. One, it instituted work requirements, exactly like we're doing today. And two, it created a 5-year time limit on the program. And I want to focus on what happened after that. The percentage of never married single mothers who returned to the workforce rose by 20 points. And here's the key thing: child poverty dropped by 60 points. When you put work requirements in place, when you put time limits or sunsets in place, we see people start to flourish. Exactly what we're trying to do. So I think we've run this experiment before. We know what works. That's what the OBBBA is entirely about. It's everyone in our society coming back and contributing to our society for their good and for everyone's good.
Absolutely. And let me ask you one more thing on the technical side of the reconciliation legislation. Isn't it true that this tool can be done again before the midterms? Or do you know
this tool? Yes.
When that clock starts, if you will, where this can be pulled out again, the reconciliation?
Yeah. So reconciliation bill, it's this, it's a technical Senate term, but it allows you to get around the filibuster, that 60 vote threshold that we just saw happen yesterday in the Senate. And it's a budget tool. So it happens every year. So yes, President Trump could do another big, beautiful bill. We'll call it APA then, I guess. And he could do other things that are on the mandatory side. So he could look at things like housing. He could look at the Treasury. He could look at other pieces of reform that are central to affordability in America. He has another shot at this.
Yeah, I think they need to before the midterms. I mean, you can't. The one big beautiful bill, as good as it is, people aren't going to. I'm just telling you, the voters. You and I might remember it, but the voters are not going to go into the booth in November of next year thinking about, wow, how great is the one big beautiful bill? It's just not going to happen. Yeah. So I think the Republicans are going to have to do another reconciliation bill between now and November of next year, and it's got to be aggressive. I mean, it's got to hit at some of the stuff that you talked about that wasn't addressed in the first piece of legislation. We've got 30 seconds, but I think this is the way to go. I mean, they have to take advantage of every opportunity they have.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So much of the one big beautiful bill was a continuation of his first term agenda, but I think, and I know that he has more to do. So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Hey, Leslie Ford, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Before I let you go, Leslie, real quick, tell our folks your URL.
Yes, please go to the allianceforoPportunity.com and you will find all of our papers with telling you how much your state might owe if they don't get their error rates under control right there under the news tab.
Excellent. AllianceforoPportunity.com. Leslie, thanks so much again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much.
All right, there you have it. AllianceforoPportunity.com. Check out that URL. And you can find out all the information about Leslie and the work that they do over at Alliance for Opportunity. All right, folks, thanks for joining us. We'll be back in just a few minutes for the last segment.
AFA Action takes attacks on the family seriously. The enemies of the family constantly employ new tactics to try to sneak past our radar. They know if we stand together, their evil plans will fail. Your gift to AFA Action allows us to stay vigilant against their onslaught. And if you give this month, you'll receive access to the Cultural Institute video When Your Faith is Illegal by Frank Harbor on AFA Stream as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildmon and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
Every day I speak with people who are worried and are feeling a lot of pressure because of credit card debt. That's why I'm very proud of what we do at Trinity. We just help. We give people the support they need, along with a real plan to become debt-free. Credit card bills are consolidated into a single monthly payment that is much less than what they were paying before. Most of our members end up saving thousands and even may improve their credit scores by as much as 200 points. I know from the bottom of my heart that I'm making a difference in the lives of the people we help. It just makes me really happy.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Julie, and I'm a Trinity counselor. Call me and become debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
What if healthcare could be more than bills and bureaucracy? What if it could reflect faith, foster community, and offer spiritual support? At Redeem HealthShare Ministry, the mission goes beyond medical bills. It's about honoring Christ and embracing healthcare that aligns with Christian values. Redeem members share medical expenses through monthly contributions, supporting one another in a Christ-centered community. It's not insurance, it's believers helping believers through financial support and prayer. And Redeem HealthShare provides freedom for members to select the doctors, hospitals, and treatments that are right for them. No networks, no restrictions, just faith-driven care. From everyday checkups to unexpected medical emergencies, Redeem offers flexible programs and encouragement rooted in Scripture. Because your healthcare should reflect your faith, not compromise it. More at redeemhealthshare.org.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio with your host, Walker Wildman.
Welcome back to the last segment of today's program. Walker Wildman here with you. As a reminder, you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just type in the name of the program, At the Core, and click the subscribe or the follow button, depending on which platform you're on. And you'll have the show queued up in your library each and every day. Just type in the name of the program, At the Core, and click the subscribe button, and you'll get the program each and every day. Welcoming our next guest, Whitney Lipscomb is with us. She is a representative for the Republican Association of Attorneys General across the U.S. All the Republican Attorneys General offices are a part of this coalition or this association. And Whitney's their representative and their spokesperson. She's with us now. Whitney Lipscomb, welcome to the program.
Walker, thank you so much for having me. Such an honor to be with y'all this afternoon, and appreciate everything y'all do to support conservative support policies and just principles that protect our families every day.
Well, thank you, Whitney. And correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned during the break that you worked for several years with the Mississippi AG's office. Does that mean you're a Magnolia native?
I am. I'm sitting here in Ridgeland, Mississippi right now.
Great.
I am. In Mississippi through and through. I served for about the past 10 years in Mississippi state government. I worked for Governor Phil Bryant as his deputy chief of staff and counsel, and then started with Attorney General Fitch on day one, minute one of January 2020, and worked with her for about 5.5 years and got to work on some incredible things. Most importantly, the Dobbs case. And about 4 months ago, joined the Republican Attorneys General Association as their general counsel and policy director.
Excellent. Whitney, give our folks an overview. I'm familiar with the work that you guys do because of the fights that we've had and how it takes multiple states working together to fight back against some of this government overreach. I'm familiar with it, but give our audience kind of a brief overview of what this Association of Attorneys General does on a kind of a day-to-day, week-to-week basis.
Sure. So the Republican Attorney General's Association, our main goal is to elect and re-elect Republican AGs across the country, and so that they can support the important policies that protect our Constitution, protect our freedoms every day. So we are here as a support organization for them, but also an organization to help bring them together. And like I mentioned earlier, on the policy front, I'm actually president of a separate organization called the Rule of Law Defense Fund as well. It's a public policy organization that supports our conservative attorneys general. And in that role, we really focus on policy, what policies that we're working on, what policies that we need to be working on. We are so fortunate right now that President Trump is in office and we're able to work with the administration. So there are a number of issues that we are working hand in hand with the president, with his administration. But before President Trump was in office and President Biden was there, the policies that weren't working for our country, and how Republican AGs were pushing back on those. And so, this organization was here to support them in those efforts.
Yeah, that's what I want people to understand, the significance here of the Attorney General office in the various states, because, you can have the legislative branch pass good legislation. You can have the executive branch sign the legislation into law. And I'm sure, as being from Mississippi, you're familiar with how the AG's office was before Lynn Fitch. But if you don't have good attorneys within the AG's office to defend the state laws or even fight back against bad federal laws and executive overreach, then you're in a bad spot as a state. And so my point is that to me, over the last, let's say 10 years, the role of the Attorney General at the state level has become very, very important to conservative policy objectives.
I 100% agree. I mean, like I mentioned, I've worked in the governor's office. I've worked in an attorney general's office. The amount of, raw power and the amount of, responsibility on your state attorneys general is so incredible. And that's why you've got to make sure that you have, very, very strong conservative legal fighters in these roles. The attorney general is the top legal and law enforcement officer for the state. They're responsible for not only enforcing the laws, but defending those laws on the books. And, they represent everyone from all of your elected officials to all of state government. But I think one of the most important things that your state AGs do is they represent the people of the state. Mm-hmm. Whether that means they're representing them in a criminal prosecution against representing a victim in that role, or they're representing, wide array of consumers in the state against huge, big, bad actors. And like I alluded to before, in times, they have to represent the people of the state against, our own federal government, like we did during the Biden administration, when we had just, an immense amount of overreach and, regulations that were coming down the pike that were just totally unconstitutional. So they're incredibly important. They're incredibly impactful. And I think, like you mentioned, their role has become so much more, amplified over the past, decade or so. And I think AGs, we have some of the most brilliant Republican AGs across the country now. And, they know how to utilize their role, but they also know how to utilize the collective effort of all of their colleagues across the country.
The election integrity, I know, is a big topic within the Attorney's General office, especially at the state level, given that they're the chief law enforcement officer in the state and they're responsible for enforcing election code in many instances. But tell us kind of how elections have come to be a significant part of what attorneys general do as far as making sure that elections are run up to par, both state and federal.
Absolutely. Election integrity is such an important issue, and it always has been. But I think attorneys general, especially post 2020, are really honing in on their authority, and they're also looking at ways that they can expand that authority and they can, better enforce that authority. So your attorneys general are responsible for enforcing election fraud. They're the ones that are responsible for, if a case comes in, whether it's from their Secretary of State, local election officials, they are the ones that are responsible for investigating and prosecuting these election crimes. And that's so important because, they're in most states, they're best equipped to do that. Your local DAs don't necessarily have experts in election integrity. AG's offices across the country, they're larger than a DA's office and a local prosecuting office. They have a lot of specialized attorneys. And you mentioned that at the beginning, Walker, which is so important. You got to have good people, but also you got to have people who care. They care about making a difference in their state and in this country. And, we do have people, across this country in AG's offices who are election integrity experts. So you've got people fighting, the fraud on the criminal side, but you also have individuals in each of these offices who are looking at, the laws, the state laws. Where do you need to, tighten up laws? Where do you need to increase enforcement? And going to their legislatures and saying, hey, look, we need to change some laws here. And I think we saw a lot of, we saw, the president early on when he took office this year, he issued a pretty wide sweeping election integrity executive order. I think that was really important for states to say, okay, how do we need to shape up our laws in accordance with this executive order? I've been on the front lines working with the RNC over the past couple of years on election integrity operations. I'm pretty impressed at how we're organizing as a party, but we got to make sure our laws are in order. We got to make sure that we're following through with prosecutions when things have gone wrong. That's the only way we're going to keep people from committing these crimes over and over. I mean, our elections are a foundation of democracy, so we have to protect them at all costs.
Whitney, before we let you go, once again, we're talking to Whitney Lipscomb, General Counsel for the Republican Association of Attorneys General. The abortion pill has been on our radar post-Roe with you've got the FDA regulations and then you have different state laws regulating the issue of abortion. And in many states now, well over a dozen, maybe even close to 24, abortion is illegal under the vast majority of circumstances, and specifically the abortion pill, mifepristone, is illegal to use in the vast majority of these states that we're talking about, these conservative states. But this kind of this loophole, we'll call it for lack of a better word, has been used where you've got these pharmacies and abortion pill providers that are shipping this drug across state lines and into states where it's illegal. And it just seems like it's really hard to track and it's hard to keep up with and enforce. And so what are you guys looking at as an association and as you work with various AGs around the country? I know Texas has weighed in on this recently, but what are you guys looking at to try to better regulate and prevent this abortion pill from making it into these states where abortion is not permissible?
Well, and I appreciate that question because this is a concern that's top of mind for, all of our nation's conservative attorneys general. Having been on the front lines, with the Dobbs case, it's kind of incredible to look now that you've got, people who are, truly violating the law and going against the state's will. We don't have abortion that's legal on demand here in Mississippi. And a lot of other states don't, yet they're receiving the pill. So one of the things that state AGs have really been looking at is the REMS. These are the safety precautions in place for the abortion pill. During the Biden administration, because of COVID and whatever, they lifted these safety restrictions. It used to be you had to go into a doctor's office to receive this pill. Now you can, they lifted the restrictions again because of COVID and they could get it via telemedicine. So Republican AGs have been pushing back and saying, hey, look, HHS, FDA, you need to consider reinstating these safety precautions. This is not a safe pill. This is not something that you take, and you go about your business. There are serious side effects from this pill. And that's why there have been safety precautions in place for so long, and then you lifted them. I'm happy to report that, a number of AGs did receive a letter from the FDA saying, hey, look, because of your urging, we're going to take a look at this. We do think that there may be some concerns here, and we need to look at reevaluate whether we put those safety precautions back in place. There are AGs across the country who are hearing, I know in Louisiana, for example, Alabama as well, they have had individuals come to them saying, look, I was slipped the abortion pill. Women who said they were by, their partner or who else saying I was slipped the abortion pill, and they're looking into, and I didn't want to receive an abortion. And so they're looking into how did they receive it? How can they go after criminal prosecution against the individual who shipped it and that? And so, those are instances that they're looking into, but I do pray across the board that there's some further action by the FDA. And I appreciate the Trump administration and the HHS for taking the opportunity to look into this and listening to our state AGs.
Yeah, they announced that they're going to look into it, meaning they're going to review the safety of the abortion pill. And then a couple of weeks later, one of the FDA panels came out and approved kind of this off-label use. And so there's a little bit of back and forth. But to your point, we've got to get a full review, because I'll almost guarantee you, if the FDA truly looks at the abortion pill from an unbiased perspective, it's not going to look good because we've seen the data, we've seen the horror stories of this abortion pill. And at the end of the day, it ends the life of a child. And so that seriously needs to be looked at by the Trump administration. Hey, Whitney, tell our folks your website with the Republican AGs Association and how they can find out more about your work.
Sure. Well, we have republicanags.com is our website, and there will be links to our Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, and then rldf.org is our public policy organization. Again, keep up with us on social media, and we will continue to fight the good fight, protect our values, protect our families, protect our most vulnerable. I think that's the most important thing we can do in this role is just to protect our country and ensure that we're making it a better place for our children and their children.
Amen. Whitney Lipscomb, thanks so much for joining us.
Walker, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Whitney Lipscomb, General Counsel for the Republican Association of Attorneys General, Republican AGs.com, RepublicanAGS.com to read more about their work. And they've been responsible for a litany of victories over the last long time, but specifically under Biden. They fought back 25 plus Republican attorneys general fought back against Biden and government overreach and won several cases, both at the lower courts and at the Supreme Court. So we've got to have that association, that coalition of Republican AGs to continue fighting and working together. All right, folks, thanks for joining us today. As a reminder, you can check out the website afr.net and the podcast page there. We'll see you next time.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Getting married, starting a family, their eternal values and ideals. These are core values that shaped this